Okay, Friday flow, here we go. Holding your frame, not regressing. Let's talk about the frame first. So, when it comes to boundaries, right, you can refer to it as frame, right? Consider the self, right? And consider like a picture frame around the self, right? That is boundaries right there. Now, when it comes to ego and ego states, as a person grows and develops and evolves, that person, and this applies to everyone, but that person, the way that this works is that the old ego state dies out, fades out, and the new ego state is kind of like formed and like moved into, right? So, the reason why I want to talk about holding your frame and not regressing. Regressing meaning kind of like reverting back to an old way or old ways of being. This could be, say, for instance, you're 30 and you're regressing back to the way that you were when you were 20. It can also go all the way back to childhood, right? Like even when you were a toddler, right? So, what's so interesting about this, because I'm looking at my own life and I'm looking at how I am in different situations, um, because I've had experiences lately where I'm spending time with people that I haven't seen in a long time, and it goes back a decade, right? And what I'm noticing is that the old ego state that I have moved away from, there are themes from that kind of like knock on my door and they're like, hey, you remember me? Yeah. We had good times together, didn't we? And it's kind of like I look back at the old ego state and I'm like, but at the same time, I'm also wondering if it's a matter of integration. The reason why I'm talking about holding your frame and not regressing is because as I am right now, I am very aware of at least one old ego state that I am allowing to like die off and like fade out of existence. And I'm doing the best that I can to be aware of that and all the while hold my frame, which is boundaries of the self. And the new ego state that I am consciously creating and moving into consists of, to the best of my ability right now at this point in my life and with everything that I've learned, healthy boundaries, right? Previously, there were permeable or rigid boundaries. Now, I'm developing a self with healthy boundaries. And it's fascinating too because as I grow and as I develop, I have experiences with boundaries, right? And sometimes it's like, oh wow, those boundaries were rigid as heck, right? Um, and that's all part of that's all part of the learning experience. But the reason again why I'm talking about holding the frame, right? Holding, and you know, I want to get into like, I guess like the nitty gritty, the nitty and gritty part of it, which is kind of like the, I would argue to be the most fascinating and interesting parts, because like whenever a person changes and they have people around them that are very aware of and familiar with their old ego state, right? There's going to be a lot of pushback. There's going to be a lot of, what's gotten into you? That's not like you. What's been going on with you? And there's a pull back to the familiar and the comfortable, especially because they are familiar and comfortable with the old you, the old ego state, right? And so, depending on how healthy these people in a person's life are, and oftentimes what I have found is that it's not a balanced sense of healthy, it's more so unhealthy, unsafe, and unstable. And rather than allowing the person to be themselves, they have a tendency to pull these people back to what it is that they're used to, rather than whatever it is that the person is trying to create for themselves. This is why it can actually be very challenging to create and maintain change. When I say change, I'm referring to ego states, old versus new. A person changes from a place of ego state, right? And what I'm referring to here is more so Freudian psychology. I suppose that there is a bit of spiritual ego theme here. I don't know how much there is. I'm really doing the best that I can right now to differentiate between Freudian ego development and spiritual ego development. Sometimes it can be challenging, but I'm learning more and more. It's a humble experience, or I should say a humbling experience. But yeah, like, so whenever it comes to change in a person's life, right, they're going from one ego state to a new one. And this is just how people grow. However, if you have people in your life that are not healthy, safe, and stable, when I say stable, let's look at the word stable. Stable identity, stable ego state, stable capacity for, like, if somebody is stable, they're not going to try to move you away from yourself, right? Because boundaries. If a person has permeable or rigid boundaries, they might be more so in line with, like, enmeshment, for instance, right? And with enmeshment comes blurred and tangled boundaries, and with that comes more so a matter of loss of self and gain of self. Loss of self, they abandon themselves for you or for other people. A gaining of self, they gain self from you, which is why, here's the thing, whenever somebody goes through change and they're in a system of enmeshment, right, the reason why it threatens somebody else is because usually that person actually gains self from the person who is going through the change, right? And if the person is different, which that's what change is, right? If the person is different from what they used to be, it's going to look very fucking weird for the other person or the other people because they don't have anything to hold on to. They're like, what the fuck is this thing? It's very unfamiliar. I don't know it. I don't like it. I don't know. No, where is the old? Get the old back here. I don't like this thing. This is so strange. Yuck. I used to gain self from you. I need to continue doing that for my own self. Get back here. Get back to the old self. Whatever it is you're trying to do, don't do that. No, get back to the old self. And that's basically the dynamic, right? And this is actually why it can be very challenging, keyword here, hold frame. This is exactly why it can be very challenging for many people when they're going through change to hold their frame, right? Because if they're trying to create a new ego state and the people around them are like, what the fuck are you doing? No, that doesn't work for me. Whatever it is that you're doing, I need you to in part or entirely do it for me. Right? So say, for instance, like, a person is doing something new, very new, right? However, they're confident that they can do it because of the work that they've done on themselves, right? And the person that is kind of like, the people in their life or a person in their life sees what they're doing and they're like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? Right? And depending on how the person who is changing themselves, specifically ego state here, the person who is changing themselves, depending on how they see themselves, how strong they are, how confident they are in the boundaries that they're creating for themselves and setting and maintaining, right? They're either going to hold their frame and not regress back to an old way of being, or they're just going to cave and regress, right? And with that, they're going to be like, oh, well, I gained self from you, and this is weird for you, and to be honest with you, it's so fucking new for me, and I don't know what I'm doing, and oh my god, I might as well just regress back to my old self. Let's do this. I'm gonna just to get kind of like, I don't know, like nasty here. It's wild. Maybe the word's not nasty. I won't label it. I'll just talk about it. Maybe the regression comes with kind of like, I don't know. Depending on what a person has come from, they're very used to and familiar with that, right? And so even if there are dynamics that are indecent between two people, right? Maybe it's how the person talks to the other person. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Like, they'll regress, right? And then the familiar, more and more familiar and comfort will surface, right? And they'll get sucked right back into an old dynamic that they're just used to and familiar with. And it's wild to see how this happens. So as I grow and as I heal, well, I would say that healing comes first because growth happens as a result of healing, and evolution, of course. Well, I would say healing, growth, evolution. But you know, I'm really doing the best that I can to be as aware as possible of the dynamics and, you know, like, aware of what I've come from and where I'm going, right? And to hold my frame. And it's kind of challenging to hold frame, especially because I've noticed that I have gained so much self from other people, which that in and of itself, through individuation and differentiation, the exact opposite of enmeshment, I'm really doing the best that I can to grow as an individual, right? And with individualism, with individualism comes the capacity to think and feel for oneself, to develop own opinions and thoughts and beliefs and all that kind of stuff separate from everyone else. This is why individuation and differentiation are so important, because if an entire group of people are fucking ganging up on you and being like, what the fuck are you doing? You can't just change. Who the fuck do you think you are? No, we gain self from you. You gain self from us. Get back in the fucking pact. What are you doing? Right? A person's capacity to hold frame in those kinds of situations are fucking vital, especially for the development of the new ego state. Right? And if you give in, if you cave easily, that's the kind of shit that fucks up the dynamic so much. But yeah, this is just so fascinating. I'm literally looking at myself and being like there are times, it happened last night actually. I'm not going to say what happened, but it happened and it was wild. There are times in the past when I've caved, right? Where it's like, yeah, obviously Chris doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Forget this fucking confidence. Ha ha ha, this is a joke. Holy shit, what the fuck? Yeah, regress. Fuck, right? That was like the old ego state. And now I'm like, yeah, that's your shit, not mine. You gain self from me, not my fucking problem. I'm individuating and differentiating, right? And that's what it is, holding frame. So I'm holding this fucking frame. Imagine my hand up on the other side. I'm holding this fucking frame around me, holding it very strongly. No, people, no. No. I am me, you are you. Be on your way. And that's really what it's like. But those victories, those wins of just being in my frame, in power, empowered, it's fucking awesome.